Hello, my little pixels. My name is Jeremy Alessi. I'm the founder of PixelFest. And I'm doing something tonight that I probably should have done a long time ago. Many people have told me that I should do it, and I've talked all of their ears off. Well, the one thing I haven't done is gotten in front of a camera and talked its ears off. So I'm going to start that process tonight. This is the first PixelFest podcast, and what I want to do is just get right into the conversation. PixelFest has been on my mind a lot lately, as it seems like it's been on a lot of other people's minds. In the past few days, I've gotten numerous emails from people asking when PixelFest 2019 is going to be, and sadly, there will not be a PixelFest in 2019. So the last PixelFest was October 2018, and before that, it was in April of 2017. So we took about a year and a half between those events, and that actually worked rather well for us. I was a little weary about skipping 2019, but putting that year and a half between the events, it really sort of mixes up the feel of the event, and I rather like that. And so I'm looking at spring of 2020 to do the next PixelFest, and I think the format of the event is also going to change. I don't want to get into too much detail about that tonight because, well, there needs to be some surprise, and I still have a lot of groundwork to lay before I can, release any details on what that event's going to be. That said, I just want to talk a little bit about how Hampton Roads has changed over the last few years, specifically here in Norfolk, where we held PixelFest. But I think a lot of things are changing in the area in general. Over the last year, we've gotten now 2 great places where you can go and get drinks and food and play games. We've got Pixels that sponsored PixelFest 2018. We love you guys. And we also have Circuit Social, which is down on Granby Street in downtown Norfolk. Also a ton of fun, and that's a place where you can go and you can play lots of great games. For example, Buddy and I went down. We played NBA Jam, and we also got to pour like a 3-ounce beer. But that's only because we only had 20 minutes from the time we bought our tickets for Spider-Man Far From Home and the time the movie started. And so we were like, what are we going to do? Well, let's walk over to Circuit and pour like a tiny little 3-ounce beer and play some NBA Jam. It was perfect. So I'm super excited to see those places because when we started PixelFest, we were getting groups of game developers together and going out to, actually, one of the places we hung out a lot was Field Guide, but we hung out at Tappet, and we hung out at a lot of other places that were all throughout Norfolk. But we were having these game development discussions, and we were talking about games in general, but the places themselves were not dedicated to gaming. And now we have not 1, but 2 locations that are dedicated to gaming. So that's been a ton of fun, and I'm so happy to see that progress in our area. Something else I want to bring up today. This is, I don't have a format for this show yet, so I'm just sort of ranting at this point, but I'm a total retro gamer at this point. I am 40 years old. Oh my God. So I like to go back and play just like old Super Nintendo games all the time, and today this happened. Can we see that? Yeah, you see Lance there? Look at his eyes spinning around. So, I'm a huge Pilotwings fan. Always have been. I think it's one of my favorite games. Maybe my favorite game of all time. I'm not certain. It's hard to say what your favorite game of all time is. So I've been playing this game for like 28 years, and I don't think I've ever gotten a perfect 100 on the hang glider on Lance's level. In case if you haven't played this game, you can pick it up on the 3DS. It is sadly missing from the SNES Classic. I think that's like a real shame. That's like the one mistake they made with the SNES Classic, was not putting Pilotwings on there, because this was a launch game for the SNES. I was blown away when I played this game, Christmas 1991. Totally mind-blowing. The Mode 7 graphics in the game were just phenomenal. But yeah, 100 points on the hang glider. The hang glider is, I think it was notoriously tricky to control because you had no power. You had to rely on the wind, and there were these these swirling silos of air, and you'd have to fly through those to get a boost. You'd get some altitude, and then you'd have to turn and land, but the landings were so tricky too because you had no power, so you really had to, as you're coming in, not only did your yaw have to be perfect, but your pitch and your altitude had to be perfect as you came in, and then your landing, because you would, let's say when you'd go in and you'd hit the A button, the hang glider would flare, and then once the character's feet hit the ground, he'd run for a little while. So it was super tricky, and I'm just super proud that I nailed 100 on that today. So that's sort of my player news lately. I've also been playing a lot of Street Fighter 2, and I've been playing Spider-Man on PS4. So Street Fighter 2, I've been playing a lot since 2018. I don't know if you were at PixelFest 2018. We had a wonderful speaker, Steve Hendershot. He wrote a book called Undisputed Street Fighter, and in that book he used the story that a friend and I told him. We used to go up to 7-Eleven, we'd ride our bikes up, and initially there was a Final Fight machine up at Food Lion, so two of my buddies and I would ride up there and we'd go play 3-player Final Fight, which was just the greatest. But a few months after that went away, and it was replaced with Street Fighter 2, which was really, at the time, was a crazy game. You'd have people lined up, putting their quarters up on the machine, and it was very competitive. You'd stand shoulder to shoulder. Usually it was somebody bigger than you, because I was only 12 or 13 years old. But we told him our story about how we go to the 7-Eleven and eventually to Aladdin's Castle and Lynnhaven Mall. And I was pretty good at the game when I was younger. I had a few stories. One guy, he spent $10 trying to beat me one time, and it was great because I got to play Street Fighter 2 like all day, is what it seemed like to me at the time. I really kind of felt sorry for the guy. And then in the book, Steve says, yeah, he lost 40 times in a row, and I did the math. I was like, it's a quarter per game. Yeah, that's right. Wow, I really feel sorry for the guy now. So I was okay at the game, and he put sort of this story in and put it in the book. So we had him come speak at PixelFest, and afterwards I just felt obligated to always be good at Street Fighter 2, which I'm not really sure if I'm that good at it anymore. I never played competitively or anything like that. I was just sort of like the local 7-Eleven, good player. But nevertheless, I just kind of feel obligated to be pretty good at that, so I've been playing that game a lot. And then I've been playing Spider-Man on PS4, which came out last year. I think it won Game of the Year, and it's phenomenal. For some reason, I was playing it last year at this time, right up until we had the hurricane last year. Then we had PixelFest. Things got crazy. I might have played it once or twice afterward, but for some reason I just got pulled away from it, and I hadn't picked it up in about a year. And then all of a sudden, I think there were some GDC videos that were coming out from GDC 2019 in March. And so those videos were coming up on Gamasutra every day. In case you don't know, gamasutra.com is a news and tech and business website dedicated to gaming, so you should definitely check it out. That's where I get a lot of my news. But these videos dive into the technical design, artistic lighting of Spider-Man in great detail. If you haven't played the game, just stop watching right now and go play it. I'm blown away by this game every single time I play it. And maybe it's because I'm a giant Spider-Man fan. Have always loved Spider-Man ever since I was a little kid. Obviously, so many people love Spider-Man. So I used to really enjoy like the '90s cartoon, and then I remember when the Tobey Maguire movies came out. That was sort of like it's almost like a port from going from the cartoons on up to the movie, and we've just seen this continual like progression of Spider-Man, higher and higher quality representations of the lore, and the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man, is probably the pinnacle of that, I think, at this point. I mean, it's tough to say. The new movies that are out are great, but this game just nails so many aspects of Spider-Man, and it's phenomenal. You have the swinging mechanics. You have all of New York City. There are approximately 10,000 buildings in this game. It was procedurally generated, and the way that the team did it and how they fit it is the lengths that they got to go through technically. And I'm a programmer by trade. It's one of the things that I do. I like to just consider myself a software entrepreneur at this point because I do so many things. But I can really get into the nuts and bolts of writing code and looking at what their engineers went through. I understand all that stuff, and it just blows my mind every little step they did to make sure that the game fit, that it was performant, that it looked great, and they just packed it all in there. So much skill went into making the game. So if you get a chance, definitely check out these videos. They're in the GDC vault. One of them, you have to punch in an email address, but you can just search for that and you'll find it. Or you can go to Gama Sutra, and they've been posting them like crazy. The game, of course, if you haven't played the game, like I said, you shouldn't even be watching this right now. If you haven't played the game, just go play it right now. It's phenomenal in every way. Like I said, from the swinging mechanics, from the way it looks, the story. There's always somebody speaking in the game. Practically, the story is like always running, even when you're just flying around the city. There are some scenes when Spider-Man is in combat mode. There are other scenes where you play as other characters and you're sort of doing these stealth missions. Spider-Man is working, or I should say Peter Parker is working with Dr. Octavius, and when you go in there, there's a little bit of story, a little bit of emotion. There are also these like logic puzzles that you have to solve, and so it really seems like it runs the gamut of Spider-Man's life, and you actually feel like you're living his life as you're in the game. In fact, one of the other portions of the game is that Aunt May is working at a homeless shelter, and so you go and you're volunteering there. Peter has also, I think it's Miles Morales. It might be getting Into the Spider-Verse a little mixed up with the game, but I think Miles Morales is in this game as well, and so Peter also sort of takes him under his wing, and he's a mentor to him. So it's hard to describe. There's a lot of depth to the feeling of the game, and everything about it is just executed flawlessly. So it's no wonder that the game has been winning awards, and you got to play it. So that's sort of like my new game, since I said I'm kind of a retro gamer at this point, so I don't play all the newer stuff anymore. If it's a Spider-Man game, I'm probably going to play it, especially that one. So that's sort of my new gaming. Now, something else I want to talk a little bit more about, and I think we haven't spoken about this enough. Anybody involved with PixelFest, and certainly not myself, but we have a group called PixelFest Devs here in Hampton Roads, and what we do with this group is we move the group around. We started in Norfolk because that's where PixelFest was, and so we were trying to create density there initially, but we realized there were other people, in Virginia Beach and across the water out in Hampton that wanted to get together, and so now what we do is we move the PixelFest Devs meetups, where we start in Norfolk, and then we go out to Hampton, then we go to Virginia Beach, and we circle back, and who knows, we could end up in Chesapeake or Williamsburg or any place, because we really just want to see Hampton Roads, the game development community here, grow. And we have so many great developers in this area that, for the most part, probably developing serious games content. Obviously, there's a lot of government work here, and I do a fair share of that myself, and I know so many other developers that are doing that. And it's great work, and well, it really is. It's great work, and it's. I feel like there's career safety. It's a pretty safe career path. The skill set. I think that the most important thing, though, is that the skill set is here. There's so many people that have these talents. There are artists, there are programmers, designers that are working on these things, and so as we go around the area, we keep finding more and more people, and that have the skill set. They aren't necessarily producing commercial games. Some people are. But the PixelFest Devs group is there so that we can get together, we can meet other developers, we can cross-pollinate ideas. The discussions tend to run the gamut. I mean, people are talking about physics, and then they're jumping into conspiracy theories, and they're jumping into art and talking about the latest games or whatever the latest techniques are. And it's interesting because it's really just a mishmash of all the conversations that I think you have to have in order to create a great game. When you create a game, you have to have a plot that has some tension, and you have to have a reason for the mechanics. You have to understand why the mechanics work or don't work. Obviously you have to have great art. There's this sort of visual communication that goes on in the game, and it has to be, not only aesthetically pleasing, but that communication has to be very strong. So there are musicians and people that do sound effects that pop up in the devs group and come out to the meetups and stuff like that. So if you're watching this, probably on the PixelFest main page, I'll probably repost it to the devs group as well. People hopefully will start sharing this stuff. I think my goal is to do this every Wednesday night. I picked Wednesday. I thought that was a good day, sort of midweek, heading into the weekend. And so I'm going to try to get this out there more and try to just promote the devs group. We primarily communicate through Facebook, although somebody recently posted us on meetup.com, which helped get a few more fresh faces in there. And I know there are a lot of other outlets that we could use. We've been sort of leaning on Facebook, but there's so many other places to go, and we need to get the devs group out there a little bit more. So hopefully this video will be reposted. We'll put it up on Twitter and Facebook. Maybe it'll get on LinkedIn and a couple other places. So we can get a little bit more spread, and we get more developers that are in Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Hampton, Chesapeake, Suffolk, wherever you might be near the area. Come on out to the devs group, have a discussion. You might meet a team member. You might be looking to do some contract work, and there might be somebody there that needs your skill set. Amazing things tend to happen when you get folks together like this. So let's see. I'm gonna have to see what I'm going to talk about next. Since I've never done this before, and I have no script. I'm literally I'm going to rant at you, like as if I had just met you at a devs meetup and we've never spoken before, and I'm just going to corner you and just like sink my claws in and just talk to you all night. I think that's more or less my goal. So another thing that I'm really excited about, and people that know me know I have not been excited about VR over the last number of years. I think basically I was pretty excited about VR back in, obviously in the 90s. I thought it was neat, those big pods and everything like that. In the early to mid 2000s, buddy of mine, Leroy Bainham, in case you're out there listening, man, we took some of those old pods. He had a few of them, and we ripped out the Amiga PCs that were running on them and put some IBM, Windows boxes in there. And we took their C libraries for these like Polhemus trackers that the VR systems were built with. And we took my first published indie game, I should say, Aerial Antics, and got them running on there with this cool VR jetpack simulator. Super excited about that. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I heard that Palmer Luckey was a lurker on the Blitz forums at the time that Leroy and I were doing that work, and we were posting screenshots and talking about the libraries that we wrote and stuff. We wrote some wrappers and whatnot, and I heard that he was a lurker when he was 12 years old or something. So if we had some small effect on the VR industry by doing that, that would be awesome. I did get excited again though when Palmer and co at Oculus did their Kickstarter. I was a backer of that Kickstarter, and I have my DK1 sitting around here somewhere, my dev kit, and I actually took one of my mobile games, Airspin, and ported it over and had a cool, Airspin port in VR where actually I also wrote a library called RiffPad where I could take the motion from any mobile device and send it over the network to the headset, so that with Airspin it had really great motion controls on the phone, and I wanted those represented in VR, so I wrote a library to do that, and that was really fun. We showed that off actually at Maker Faire. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but we had a Maker Faire here in 2012 and 2013, and we showed off Airspin and VR at both of those, which was cool. We eventually did have to, mandate that you sit in a chair when you play it, because we had somebody playing it that just, and so that was a lot of fun, and I got excited then too. Now, when I really sort of got turned off of VR, I think was when, and this is going to sound so wrong, but Oculus sent all Kickstarter backers the first retail Rift that came out, and I got that box and it says Kickstarter backer on it, and that's really cool. But when I took it out to hook it up, and I realized, well, I can't use it with my Mac, and I don't have a powerful enough PC to run it, and it takes an ungodly number of USB ports to run the thing with the full configuration and setup, and that just turned me off of VR completely, because I went from being pretty excited about the technology, being in it. My first experience with VR was when it wasn't popular, and I was just sort of messing around in a garage, and then I moved into seeing Oculus scale up, and they've got this new dev kit, and that was easy. You could plug that into just about anything and it would work. It didn't take up too much. It was a little cumbersome with the power box and the USB cables and whatnot, but it was doable, and it had a nice carrying case, and the form factor was pretty small, and it was. And because it was a dev kit, I think it was easy to sort of let it off the hook and say, oh yeah, it's a little cumbersome right now, but this is gonna be something that becomes easier to use. Well, when that first Rift showed up, and it just required so much to actually set up, and I didn't have the hardware, and I realized, wow, to me it almost felt like a step back from the developer kit. I know the resolution was supposed to be better, the weight was supposed to be better, it was supposed to be a more polished product and all this, and they really wanted to set the bar high for VR experiences, and I get that. I just was barred out of it. And then I used the Vive not long after that, and I thought that was great because I was actually walking around. We had room scale, but there was still the wire. My buddy's like holding the wire behind my head so I can walk around, and you've got the big lighthouses, and so there's just a lot of setup with those things, and it just never felt right to me, and I wasn't sure if they would ever take off. I was actually I think more interested in augmented reality. I thought that the HoloLens or the Magic Leap or any of those things were really going to go a lot further than VR. I just wasn't seeing the VR industry really go in a direction that seemed accessible. And, not that some of the experiences weren't cool, but the accessibility was so poor that I wasn't excited about it. I can say that. And there were frequent times that I wanted to get out there and post and say, I hate VR. Don't worry, don't invest yourself in VR. It's going to be a loser. And then a couple of weeks ago, I started reading. It was our July PixelFest Devs meetup, and a local company, IDSI, they do great work. They had 2 wireless VR headsets. I think one was like the Vive Pro. I forgot even what the name of it. There's a wireless Vive, and then they had the Oculus Quest there. And so they were raving about the Oculus Quest, saying how wonderful it was. There were literally no wires at all, and I think it uses 4 cameras pointing in different directions, running SLAM, which is an algorithm where you can use computer vision in order to locate the device, and it's something similar to like what ARKit would use on iPhone, or I think RCore on Android is probably using similar technology. And so these 4 cameras pointing out from the device, it's reading in 4 different directions, and it always has some vague idea of where it's looking and how fast it's moving and so on and so forth. And that's probably in addition to using the sensor data like the gyroscope, accelerometer, and all of that. So anyway, they were raving about it, and I started looking up reviews of it, watching some videos, and it's selling extremely well. There are a lot of YouTubers that are raving about it, and I think I'm going to take the plunge. I think when I looked at this, I finally had that feeling, that sort of like it factor feeling of, maybe not since the first iPhone have I gotten that feeling about a device, but I think I have it with the Oculus Quest. Now, I haven't made anything for it yet. In fact, I haven't even purchased one yet. But I think I'll be purchasing one soon, and that's something that I think if I pick one up, I'll be sure to come back on a future episode of the PixelFest Podcast and let you know how I feel about it and what I'm doing with it. Speaking about trends, though, so I think VR is a trend. It's one that I really wasn't, I think, all that interested in over the last 4 or 5 years until now. There's another trend that I want to turn to, which is it's cryptocurrency based, except I don't want to talk just about cryptocurrency. Something I've been recommending just via word of mouth to other developers, people that are making games, is the Brave web browser. And I think this is something that's pretty fascinating. So right now, if you're making a mobile game, you're probably making it free to play. You're probably putting ads in it, and you're probably designing mechanics that will necessitate consumable in-app purchases. I've written articles about this. I started with iPhone from like almost day one. I was year one. At the end of 2008, I had put my first iPhone game out, and I watched it grow from being a thing where people would pay like $10, I think even $20 for the early games, down to everybody dropping the price to 99 cents, and then down to free with ad networks, and then to in-app purchases. And at one point, a lot of people labeled that as the race to the bottom in mobile, where it was just like, woo, we're not charging money for our stuff anymore, yay. And so, and it changed gaming. So before that, we looked at gaming as like this very quality thing, something that was highly valuable. There wasn't a lot of it per se, certainly not a lot of high quality stuff. And so we were paying $60 for like Xbox, PlayStation, maybe we were paying $50 for Wii games at the time. And that was like after, years ago, obviously, when we were buying Super Nintendo games, there were times that we were paying $70, even $80 for those. I paid $100 for Virtua Racing on the Genesis. And Neo Geo games used to be $200-$300, I think, way back in the day. So we used to pay like a lot of money for a game. And when mobile came around, all of a sudden the prices just started nosediving. And it seemed almost as if games had no value anymore. I think there was a talk that Satoru Iwata gave of Nintendo where he was sort of passionately defending the work that Nintendo does, saying our work has value. And I think a lot of developers were sort of feeling that as those prices came down. And really just what I noticed is that business model changed, and it changed all of gaming, but specifically those games. Like when you're playing those games, games aren't necessarily an escape anymore. So I feel like games used to be this escape. You'd sort of go off into game world and it was a fantasy. But once you charging people money for actions in the game, you're not letting them escape, right? You're nickel and diming them as they're doing that. Now, personally, and it's probably a generational thing, I'm sure people that are younger than me don't feel this way. People that grew up with this, they feel differently about gaming, I'm sure. But for me, that really just like breaks the illusion of the game. Like when I play a game, I'm perfectly fine paying a price up front, and even if it's expensive, as long as it's worth the experience. Then once I get into that experience, I just don't want to think about money when I'm in there. So I think, take Spider-Man, for example. I'm sure I paid $60 for that game last year. But when I go into it, I don't think about money at all. And I love that. I'm not thinking about, should I purchase this? Is this a good deal? Da-da-da. No, I just become Spider-Man, and I get lost in that fantasy, and I never think it wasn't worth the money. I'm sure some people in the past got burned by those games that were expensive and whatnot. I think that's what, when I was growing up, Babbage's started, having a return policy, so you could just return those expensive games. But, that said, the free-to-play stuff, it really blew the market wide open. I mean, that's why we have games now with like hundreds of millions or even billions of players. I think some games, I think there's a game out there that's hit 1 billion. Probably Pokemon Go. But still, it changes the game. That whole fantasy aspect of it is sort of gone, and you're always sort of being nickeled and dimed is the way that I feel about it when you're playing those games. There's always that impetus of, should I use real world currency to buy something in the game, or not, or am I just going to play longer? I think that's usually like the two paths. And sort of circling all the way back to the beginning of this rant, but basically the Brave web browser has come along, and it allows content creators on the internet to be paid in their cryptocurrency, which is called BAT, which stands for Basic Attention Token. So if you can hold someone's attention on the internet, you can get paid in Basic Attention Token. Simple enough. That's a very simple concept, right? So if people are using the Brave web browser to access your content, and the Brave web browser automatically gives them essentially like a stipend. It gives them cryptocurrency, I think every month. I forgot what they're actually got an email from them recently that they're going to start changing the distributions depending on what region of the world you live on. They started with like a totally flat distribution, but because there is an ad component to it underneath at some point, just not collecting your data because it's a privacy-focused web browser, they did have to change the model a little bit. The cool part is, though, as a content creator, you don't really have to worry about any of that. All you have to do is make content that holds people's attention, and you can receive some of that money from them. Brave automatically, I think you can set it to 50-50, I think is the lowest ratio you can set. So just by having people's attention, you'll be paid in Basic Attention Token. But on top of that, people can tip you in Basic Attention Token. And so the tokens are doled out automatically just for using the browser. That's only a certain amount, that you're given for free. Now, advertisers can use Basic Attention Token also to purchase ads that will only run through this browser. And I think there's some interesting controversy over this because I think they replace the ads that are on websites with their own ads through their own ad network, something to that effect. And I think there might be some copyright infringement type lawsuit going on with publishers in Brave. But it's a very interesting premise. And if you're making a game where you don't want to worry about, like, I have to make my business model in my game, if you just want to make a good game, I don't think mobile is really the route anymore. I know a lot of people are like, oh, I want to do, put a mobile game out there, and I think those days are just, in my opinion, are long gone. As somebody that made mobile games, and I think I have 10 million plus downloads under my belt on mobile, I don't bother with mobile games anymore. Let's say that. No, apps, things like that. In certain cases, I might feel differently about it. Maybe on the utility side, but on the gaming front, to me, it's hard to justify doing a mobile game at this point. You're just not going to get the attention, and it's very commoditized. And so, the people that have the mobile games at the top, they're spending usually a ton of money to keep those games up at the top. Or what you're just talking about is, the most popular games in the world that maybe just by sheer virtue of what they are can maintain their position up there. Something, and I'm basically talking about Minecraft, but other folks that are up there spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a day to keep those games popular, using various ad networks and things like that. So it's tough to recommend. I'm not saying don't. Certainly it's possible, but usually the way the game works is somebody creates a new platform or technology, something cool, and they've raised some sort of capital with it. They already have the finances. Like when Apple made the App Store back in the day, obviously you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company that did this, and they already have the resources, and what they do is they initially will look for use cases, and then they become sort of makers, right, where they'll pick and choose, well, this is the best content here. Let's make this app developer a millionaire, this game developer a millionaire, that type of thing. And so there's this sort of king-making phase, and that's what draws everybody in onto the platform. That king-making phase is essentially over for the app stores and things like that. It's 10 years ago, is the way that I think about it. So I've sort of got my eye on, where's the new place to go to find success that was similar to the way the App Store was, or even, and some people will go back to the .com era, and some people will go back. If you sort of follow technology back, you could go back to the Apple II, and there was a phase like that. The Nintendo Entertainment System, there was a phase like that. I'm sure, sort of with each wave, like on Atari, I'm sure there was a phase like that. And so with technology, we see these platforms come out, and there's some winners and there's some losers, and eventually it just sort of flatlines and becomes commoditized. And as a newcomer, there's just not a whole lot you can do to overcome that. I was talking to somebody recently, I think, that had 30 downloads of their mobile game, and I'm just sitting there going, wow, when I put my mobile game out in 2008, I not only had 30 downloads a day, but they were paid downloads. It was people were paying $5 for those things back then. So it's actually, I wasn't just trying to give my game away at that point. Not, I was getting 30, 60 downloads a day, and they were $5 a piece or something. And so that was just a whole different world back in 2008, versus today. And so, and it's tough to justify, because when you go to in-app purchases or ads, in order to make money, you really need I'm just trying to think, with ads, you need tens of thousands of people playing the game every day in order to generate any sort of real income, from the game. And so, and I'm sure it's even worse now. I think the first game that I did that had ads that did well was a game called Crash for Cash, and I released it initially as a paid app in 2009, and then in 2010 I just said, I'm going to go ahead and make this free, and it organically climbed to the top of its categories. I think it was in the racing and simulation categories or something like that, and it sort of climbed all the way to the top of those categories, and this game was generating in excess of $1,000 a day in revenue. This game was generating, so it was doing very well, but it had hundreds of thousands of people playing it. This game eventually went on to have more than 10 million downloads, and it was to the point where, at the time, AdMob was just a startup at the time before they were sold to Google, but they didn't have enough ads to fill the requests that the game had. And so at first the game was making a ton of money, and then after a little while they said, well, we can't serve you any more ads on the network. Essentially the fill rate dropped, which was annoying. I don't think you'd have a fill rate drop anymore, but the one thing I can say is the price of ads is probably a lot lower. And so even if you had 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people playing your game, you're probably not going to be making a lot of money with that. And so and I also think, if you're an indie out there, if you're a small one-off developer, if you want to get into mobile just for the experience, I think that's okay. If you're trying to build a business on it, probably got to look elsewhere. And so Brave is one of the things I've been looking at as a platform. I think that's interesting. You can actually get in touch with them and do some business development. And of course, I think the Oculus Quest, I think the sales on that hardware sound like they're really good. It's apparently sold out in a lot of places. And there's just a really good vibe when you listen to people talk about it. So that's probably something to look forward to. And if anybody comes out to a PixelFest Devs meetup and has some more experience with it, publishing on it, or whatnot, love to talk to you. And obviously, I'll share my thoughts with you about that in the future. So let's see. I feel like I've been talking for quite a while. What do you say? Should we call it a night? First PixelFest podcast. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. See how long I've been doing this for. This is the first one. I hope you enjoyed listening to me just rant. At some point, I'd like to get some guests, onto the show, and obviously I want to drop more details about what we're thinking for PixelFest in 2020. And I really want to see anybody that's watching this come out to our devs meetups. Let's get together and chat. Let's build this game development community together. And I think we're going to see a lot of good things happen in Hampton Roads once we get this creativity and technology and social interaction, art, music. Games are everything. So let's get together and let's build some great stuff. And yeah, let's all continue growing through love of games. I'm Jeremy Alessi. Have a good night.